I'm Freedberg. I'm Executive Director of EdSource, and the goal of this panel is to put the emerging teacher shortage in California in perspective. I actually took the train up from Berkeley this morning and ran into Felicia Marcus, who's head of the Water Resources Board in California, maybe the most important position in the state at the moment. She's very happy with the rain. But I was thinking about that there are actually some interesting parallels and differences between the teacher shortage and the water shortage, both hugely important to the future of the state, complicated issue. But the big difference, one of the big differences, is that the water shortage really depends on things out of our control, acts of God, or however one wants to define it. Whereas the teacher shortage, fortunately, does not require divine intervention, that it's actually in our hands to do something about it. So to start off the discussion, we have a very distinguished panel here today. Patrick Shields is Executive Director of the Learning Policy Institute, and he is with Leib Sutcher, a research assistant at the Institute, and they will present the findings of a paper produced by the Institute that is being released today about the emerging shortage, and it's the most exhaustive report on the subject to date. We'll then turn to our other panelists. Dave Gordon, who many of you know, is County Superintendent of Education in Sacramento County. Jesse Levin is a principal researcher at the American Institute for Research. Kimberly Rodriguez is the Chief Education Advisor to Senate President Pro Tem Kevin De Leon in the state capitol, just a few blocks away. Did I cover everyone? Before turning to Patrick and Leib, I wanted to start off by reviewing very quickly the results of a field poll that EdSource and the Learning Policy Institute commissioned of registered voters in California. What is clear is that the general public is very concerned about the teacher shortage, arguably more than the state legislature appears to be at this point. In fact, 2/3 of registered voters say the teacher shortage is a very serious problem. About the same number say it is extremely important that the state do more to encourage young people and others to enroll in teacher preparation programs. That includes strong support for forgiving a portion of college loans or offering scholarships to prospective teachers. 2/3 say it is a very serious problem that schools in low-income communities have fewer qualified teachers than those in wealthier areas. On one positive note, 70% of the respondents said they would be very likely or somewhat likely to encourage a friend or family member to become a teacher in California. So there's still optimism about the profession as a whole. We're very fortunate to have Dave Gordon here today, and I'm going to just ask Dave to talk about specifically what is the situation here in Sacramento County. Is there a shortage, and how would you define it?
First of all, I framed this into 4 or 5 simple questions. So number one, what and where are we short of teachers? Okay, you've heard about regular teachers, but you haven't heard about substitute teachers yet. We're desperately short of substitute teachers, and why is that especially important? Well, the rules require that if you don't have a regular teacher and you have to use a sub, you can't hire a sub long-term. So for regular ed classes, you have to change out the sub every 30 days. For special education teachers, you have to change out the sub every 20 days. So if you have a long-term vacancy, that means you need lots and lots of subs. So districts are bending over backwards to figure out where do we get subs. And some of our local districts, Elk Grove in particular, are trying to turn to their parent population and recruiting among their parents. Math, science, and special ed teachers are scarce everywhere. Other teachers are professional organization, the county superintendent's organization, did a survey about a month ago and found this shortage to be most acute in urban districts and in the Central Valley. And I think it's important to understand, as when we consider policy changes, that there isn't really one California. There are really 5 or 6 Californias. And the status of each of them varies dramatically. You have the Bay Area, you have Los Angeles, you have Southern California, accepting the Inland Empire. You have the Inland Empire, you have the far north rural counties, and then you have the San Joaquin and the Central Valleys. Very, very different profiles, with the neediest really being the Central Valley, the Inland Empire, and the rural north, largely because of its ruralness. Second question, what's driving the shortage? Obviously you heard about there's low supply, but in addition to that, in addition to the usual attrition and retirements, there are not only needs to lower class sizes, there are requirements for the K-3 class size reduction to lower class sizes in order to continue to be eligible for the extra money. So that's creating a major need for new teachers. With the new funding that we have very graciously gotten from the state, heaven knows for professional development we have needed funding for years and years and years, and heaven only knows we hope it continues. But along with that funding, that's creating the need to take teachers out of the classroom to become professional developers, to become teacher coaches. And in many, many districts, these are things that they had before the recession, so that's drawing teachers out of the regular classroom. And then finally, the infusion of new career technical education programs is also creating a need for new secondary teachers in particularly the math, science, engineering kinds of fields. So all of those pressures are actually increasing the need for new teachers. Next question, what makes districts more or less competitive for new hires? And this is a really important question. In our county, we have 13 school districts, and on the first day of school, we do a survey. How many teachers are you short? Now, school's already started. It's the first day of school or later. And 11 of our districts had very minimal shortages, a few teachers short here and there. But one district had over 90 vacancies, and another district had over 60 vacancies. And that's very, very difficult to recover from at that point in the year, because there aren't a lot of candidates hanging around at that late stage. So what are some of the things that cause that? In some cases, the districts have labor contracts which are pretty restrictive, in the sense that they make you wait until the summer to make a firm offer to a new teacher. And that's to allow other teachers in the system to transfer, if they wish, to vacancies that would occur during the year, because sometimes you don't find out about an impending retirement until very close to the end of the school year. So think about it, in the face of a shortage, if you're waiting till July or August to make an offer, you don't have many people left to make an offer to, because they've been snapped up by the other school districts.
Dave, could I just ask you to hold that thought, or I want to get to Kimberly and then we can come back to you if there's other questions. Okay. Or do you want, yeah, let me just jump to Kimberly so we can get the view from the Capitol. So Kimberly Rodriguez, how much concern do you see up in the state Capitol, and what is Senator De Leon's view? What does he plan to do about this issue?
So the Senate is having a hearing tomorrow, actually, on the teacher shortage, and it'll be a pretty extensive hearing. We're going to hear about this report that you all have heard about it. Can you hear? And from our perspective, we have several senators who are very interested in the issue and have been for a long period of time, including Senator Liu, Senator Allen, and Senator Pavley, in different approaches. So this will be a topic that we'll be discussing, I think, throughout the year in the Senate. From my boss's perspective, he sees this as an equity issue, and we've been talking about it as an equity issue in our office. Given that we've just redone the formula and we've put a lot of emphasis on certain type of pupils who need additional help, this is just an extension of that conversation and how we need to look at education as a whole in terms of how we address equity. Because as the report points out, and even we saw in the late 90s and early 2000s, that students who are taught by substandard teachers generally tend to be poor, minority, and those issues are going to resonate with our members particularly. I do want to pick up on something that Dave said in terms of there's a lot of other issues related to recruitment and retention of teachers that are very regional specific. And the first one that comes to our minds, as we've been talking about, is housing. As you've seen a lot of recent articles in the newspaper, particularly in the Bay Area, about certain cities taking it on. So this can't just be an educational policy issue, that's what drives it, but there's other factors that affect the ability of teachers to be hired and recruited and retained. So from the Senate's perspective, we're also looking at that as well in terms of not just an educational issue, but what other factors can affect our ability to close this shortage and address it. So those are the things. I think this is going to be a big topic for our members this year in terms of wanting to tackle it. I do think that when I was looking up at the list at the beginning of the presentation of all of the policy issues that we had, or policy responses that we had, like CalTeach, TRIP, those centers, I was in Assembly Budget when we made those difficult decisions to cut the funding when the dot-com boom happened in 2002 and 2003. So I think from our perspective in the Capitol and with this governor, we're probably going to need to take a more strategic, more laser-like approach with how we do that and how we build it out, because I don't think we want to get in a position with a few years down the road, if there does happen to be a recession, that we're going to have to dismantle it all again and be in the same position we were before. So those are the kinds of
So
issues.
Kimberly, can I just ask you about, there was a bill, or is a bill, Senate Bill 62, I believe it was Senator Pavley's bill, which was to give this loan forgiveness, modest amount for Apple loan forgiveness, and
Yes.
that didn't really go anywhere. It's still on the floor. Does
It's
Senator
still
De Leon
in the-
support that? Why isn't that moving through?
It's basically an issue of funding. So you have two different types of funding in California. You have things that we can fund under Prop 98, which that is the largest portion of the budget. That's what's grown a lot. You have other non-98 funding, which is your higher education, your prisons, your courts, health care, and those are not protected under Prop 98. Those grow less high, and when you pay for Apple, you pay for it out of that part of the budget. So when you have less money, you have to make priority decisions. So Apple, I think, will be on the table again this year. We have a little bit stronger fiscal outlook than we did last year in terms of on the non-98 side of the budget. So we'll see how that discussion goes. But I know Senator Pavley's been a longtime champion, and we will be discussing it greatly in the Senate.
Okay. Can I just ask Patrick or Leib to address an issue that Jesse raised about data and the ability to really drill down? Some other states appear to have more data than we. What data do we need, or do we have enough data to really track this issue?
Well, we have the data.
Speak up.
It's just not available, and it's not connected across data sets. But the basic deal is that you're not, in any one year, teachers can leave the profession, and perhaps they retire. And there is a database that allows us to know who's retired or not, but it's not connected to the workforce database in any way. Or they may just have moved to another district. So having individualized data longitudinally would allow us to do a much better job and much more of the fine-tuned work that Jesse talked about, where you're able to look at middle school special ed teachers or high school math teachers in a way that we're not able to look at in the state right now.
Okay. I wanted to go to Dave Gordon again because, Dave, I know you had a couple of things to say, but to what extent do you see that there's a sense of urgency or crisis? Are people at the district level really, is it at the top of the agenda, or how are they coping with this now?
There is a huge sense of urgency, and the other point I just wanted to make is that often it's salary that is a determinant in whether teachers want to work in a particular district or not. Often it's other things, such as I mentioned, the labor contracts don't allow them to hire on a timely basis. But in many places, in many cases, it's how the organization treats its employees, particularly its teachers. And that ranges from, is there robust professional development to help people grow in their jobs and do their jobs better? Is there a human resource office that is very responsive to people's needs when they have a problem with the retirement system or the healthcare system? And in many districts that are successful in hiring and keeping teachers, they pay a lot of close attention to those things. And that's very important because in the end, if you talk to teachers, for a district being considered a great place to work is the biggest attraction for people to come and work there. A final point that I'll make is how are we responding? We have a teacher intern program which our office runs, which is going to double in size this year because we're pretty nimble. We're able to expand that program. We're very pleased to have a new partnership with Encore, who is here today, and Kimberly Wilcox is here today, and we have a new staff person from Encore co-located with our staff at SCOE. So I think there are many things we can do, and I think we in our districts working together will help make this happen. So thank you.
We have almost run out of time, and I just wanted to turn to Patrick or Leib before we disband this panel and move on to the next. What would you say is the main takeaway that we should really be taking away from this discussion going into the rest of it today?
I think it's really clear. Pay attention to the data, maintain quality, and no short-term fixes. They're just not going to get us there. You know, the notion of just sort of filling seats with warm bodies who are just going to leave next year is not a way to get us out of this. I think we learned the last time that focusing on high quality and focusing on equity are the two main solutions.
Okay, terrific. Can you join me in thanking this terrific panel?